playoffs. Let's shift gears over to the Bengals. So they have, and you and I have talked about this, they have until I think it's February the 22nd, correct me if I'm wrong, to start dealing with franchise tags and things like that. Are you hearing anything? I mean, most of us assume they're going to tag Higgins, they're going to keep him, and keep the band together for one more year. Are you hearing anything contrary to that?
Yeah, nothing to report right now, but, it'd be malpractice if they didn't give T. Higgins the franchise tag just to continue and push forward the extension in the negotiation process. And that's the key word, negotiation. Like, the only steps that are going to take place between now and free agency are the Bengals and Higgins will check in. Hey, where you at on this number? Hey, where you at on this number? And both sides have their sticking points, have their ground that they'd like to stand. And this is the same as it was with Jesse Bates, the same as it was with every contract extension negotiation in franchise history. And then I think the real deadline for me isn't the franchise tag deadline, because I see that as pretty inevitable. The real deadline is the start of free agency, because either you have Higgins tagged under, you have Higgins earmarked that franchise tag money under that contract, and you can't spend that into free agency, or you have Higgins not under contract at that point. You get a trade done by something like that, and you have $20 million to spend. So to me, the key date to watch is the start of free agency, because that's when they know whether or not they have $20 million to spend for Higgins or $20 million to spend elsewhere.
Okay. In that same sort of vein, however, Charlie, is you look at the needs that they have, and there are many of them, and we've addressed many of them. At the end of the day, do you think with all the money the Bengals have, at least for this season, under the salary cap, do you think they go blow the doors off this whole thing and start trying to get anything they can get for right now to try and win it this year?
The most all-in move they could make would be keeping T. Higgins on the franchise tag. If you want to look at it's actually very baseball here. Like, teams trade in baseball players with a year or two left on their deal to try to spin it forward for the future. If you want to play the long-term game, you trade Higgins or even you extend him. That would be a longer-term window. If you want to play the short-term game, if you keep Higgins, or if you have to keep Higgins just on the one-year franchise tag because you can't get an extension or a trade you like done, that's when I think you have to make more aggressive win-now moves. Specifically, though, there I look at the draft. I look at, do you address less premium positions with higher picks because they would play more snaps for you, be more aggressive with positions like running back and tight end? Or do you just continue with the best player available model, take another receiver to kind of wait in the wings behind Higgins for 2024? I think it's still a good enough roster to win the Super Bowl next year. So especially if you have Higgins on the tag, I'd look at more aggressive situations or more aggressive moves through the draft. Also, like splurging, kind of going all in with your remaining free agency capital on a really good pass rushing defensive tackle. I like the name Christian Wilkins a lot. Again, he's not a guy who his best year will probably be 2024. So that's probably more of an all-in move as well. I do like that approach if the way the Higgins conversations go dictate you go that way.
Okay. What were your thoughts? Your thoughts about the changes in the coaching staff. Not necessarily that Brian Callahan left, and not necessarily that Pitcher takes his place, but now the moves that just happened the last couple of days.
Yeah, one of the sneaky things that I was kind of concerned about with the Bengals was something Brian Callahan does incredibly well. Like, one of his gifts as a coach, he's great at developing a plan against the blitz, and he's great at, when you draw up a play on the whiteboard, how does that mesh with the pass protection plan, with the linemen, the running backs, and the tight ends? Callahan was, that was his thing. That was his baby with the team. How do you replace that? Pitcher has less experience with that. Zach Taylor had less experience with that than Callahan. So what do you do? What type of guy do you want to bring in to replace that, to fill that void, to fill that role in the game plans? Well, how about a guy who is a former quarterback who coached offensive linemen last year? And that's new passing game coordinator Justin Riscotti. I would expect he filled that specific role from a game planning perspective. They changed the structure of the coaching staff to add a guy with that skill set. They widened their overall offensive coaching staff pipeline by adding a guy who, if Pitcher's head coach next year, can slide in and slide up along with Brad Cragthorpe. You have more of those quarterback voices in the building, which is very helpful.
The NFL has always been a huge copycat league, and all you have to do is follow the last decade, maybe more than that, maybe a lot longer than that, but certainly, the last decade or so about, what's successful for a team. You look at let's say, the Patriots in all those years. I mean, they had a year or two there with Randy Moss where he was off the charts, but he was the only big-time wide receiver. Edelman was a different kind of a player. He wasn't a game breaker, but a great player, Hall of Fame player, without a doubt. But they had Gronkowski. And now all of a sudden you look at this year, right? Even the last couple of years, and teams that played in the championship game. You got the 49ers who have a great tight end. Yeah, they have one great receiver. The rest of the guys are okay. They can have a good game, but, so every now and again, Ayuk and those guys. The same thing holds true when it comes to Kansas City. They got Kelsey. For a while there, they had Tyreek Hill. And now they've got some guys, that are okay. They're not Chase. They're not Higgins. Do you think that the Bengals look at that and say, man, maybe we ought to reconsider how we're structuring this offense and the importance where this offense should be? We have the great quarterback. We have one great wide receiver. Do all of a sudden, should they really go all in on a big-time tight end?
So they've already considered this. Like, there's a scenario where the 2023 Bengals feature Dalton Kincaid or Sam Laporta if the draft goes a different way. Like, the Bengals are interested, have explored, have looked at the opportunity of adding a real, quality tight end to their offense for a while. It just hasn't worked out based on, not many tight ends, who have other options would want to sign up to be the fourth wide receiver on a Bengals team. That's what it would have been in 2021 and 2022 when they had the big three. And then, this year it's a different scenario with Tyler Boyd now gone. And like I've said before, they could replace a lot of that production with the tight end. Now, tight end versus receiver, to them it matters less, kind of like they don't necessarily view it that way. To them, it's like pass catcher number 3. Could be a tight end, could be a receiver, gives you some flexibility. I think that the common denominator between those teams you mentioned is they have elite pass catchers. And on these teams, the elite pass catchers happen to be tight ends. But I don't necessarily think it's more valuable to have a tight end who's great just because he's a tight end compared to any other pass-catching weapon that you could add into the mix. So the Bengals are looking to add pass-catching weapons this offseason. Tight ends are certainly a path they could aggressively go to make that happen. But if, the board shakes out a certain way and their third pass catcher happens to be, the best route to get that guy as a receiver through their draft or free agency, and then you backfill at tight end like you have in previous years, that's kind of what happened last year. It could happen the same thing in 2024. Again, I think the common denominator is having great weapons, not necessarily a great tight end.